talk about this. Alec Baldwin, he is headed to trial this week. This is nearly 3 years after the deadly shooting on his Rust movie set. Baldwin has been charged with involuntary manslaughter for the death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. He has pleaded not guilty, but if he is convicted, he could face up to 18 months in prison. It is a case that has seen many twists and turns. Joining me now to talk more about this is trial attorney Brian Claypool. Brian, thank you so much for being here. You know, first I want to get to this. We've been following this for a long time. 3 years later, the prosecutor in the case originally dropped the charges, then reinstated them. What are the prosecutors, what are they going to have to argue to prove to the jury that Baldwin is liable in Halyna Hutchins' death?
Yeah, hey, Kelsey, great to be with you. Yeah, so the prosecutors have to prove involuntary manslaughter. What does that mean? Basically, that the negligence of Alec Baldwin caused the death of Halyna Hutchins. I think they've got a tough case ahead. Why? Because they've got to prove causation. Legal causation is a little more difficult to prove in a criminal case versus a civil case. And here, the prosecutors are going to argue that the OSHA report. Remember, the OSHA report is probably the best evidence that the prosecutors have. That the production set was a train wreck. That it was not managed properly. It was dangerous. That there was live ammunition previously on the set, and that there's evidence of Alec Baldwin shooting live ammunition before the Hutchins death. So that's their key piece of evidence. But the big gorilla in the room is, did that legally cause the death? Because what really caused the death, what Baldwin's going to argue is what really caused the death is Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer, failing to ensure that there was no live ammunition in the gun.
There's really just so many parts to this case. And I think the other thing really hurting Baldwin is that he's a producer on this film. Another thing I want to ask you about is he's already said in a TV interview he did not pull the trigger. Let's go ahead and watch that for a second.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never. That was the training that I had. You don't point a gun at me and pull the trigger.
Would it be smart for Baldwin to take the stand on his own behalf?
Yeah, it really depends on how the testimony unfolds, Kelsey. A good criminal defense lawyer doesn't make that decision in consult with their client until the need arises. I will tell you this, though, that in New Mexico, there is what's called a but-for test. The U.S. Supreme Court adopted a test called the but-for test for legal causation. It's been adopted in New Mexico because this is a state court case. And what that means is that Baldwin's actions standing independently have to have caused the death. And I guarantee you Baldwin's lawyers are going to argue that the but-for test fails because it's not what Baldwin did or didn't do. It's the fact that there was a live piece of ammunition in that gun, and that should have been removed by Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. But look, at the end of the day, if I'm a guessing man here, I don't think Baldwin takes the stand because I think there was a discrepancy in whether he pulled the trigger or not. Yeah, and look, Baldwin's lawyers are also going to argue that the gun was fault. The testing of the gun was faulty. Remember, they filed a motion to throw out these charges because the prosecutors tested the gun to see if the trigger was pulled, and they actually damaged the gun, which hampered Baldwin's ability to effectively test it. So that's going to be persuasive to the jury as well.
How likely is it that you think Baldwin is going to be convicted and will serve time?
Yeah, great question. I don't believe Baldwin's going to be convicted in this case. And the reason why is I believe prosecutors already have the culprit. Remember, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, she is solely responsible. Her job is to make sure there is no live ammunition in that gun. That's her sole job. And she didn't do that. And Kelsey, I guarantee you that Baldwin's lawyers are going to argue until the cows come home that Gutierrez-Reed is responsible. They're effectively going to argue what the prosecution argued against Gutierrez-Reed. Remember, there were allegations that she was surrounded by drugs, that she was incompetent, that it's her job to do this. They're going to argue the case made against Gutierrez-Reed. And I think it's a powerful case. And in the end, if the jury follows the law, if they follow this but-for test, I think Baldwin's acquitted. But who knows? I mean, if the jury's caught up in emotion, like you said, Baldwin's a celebrity. If he wasn't a celebrity, maybe this case isn't brought. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see, and it's really interesting to see really what happens here. Brian Claypool, thank you for your time. Well, President Biden.